Hello, and welcome to Golden Creatives Talk, the podcast dedicated to insightful conversations with Black and Brown creatives who are shaping culture across cultures. I'm your host, CT Luna, and today we have a truly golden guest joining us, Kim Golden, a USA Today best-selling indie author of romantic women's fiction who now calls Southern Sweden home.
Thank you.
Welcome, Kim. So I'm going to just share a little bit about your background.
Okay.
Born and raised in Philadelphia, Kim is a fierce Philly sports fan who went south to Richmond, Virginia, to pursue her MFA, her Master's in Fine Arts. But it was a handsome Swede who swept her off her feet that she met in 1993 and convinced her to move to Stockholm. So now, over 20 years later, she has settled in Malmö, Sweden, and still deeply in love. She writes interracial and multicultural love stories featuring smart, complicated Black women finding love in Europe and in the United States. Her latest work is A Piece of My Heart, a Hunter's Grove love story, which we will talk about a little bit later. And it's available exclusively on Substack for now. So, Kim Golden, welcome to Golden Creatives Talk.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So let's start with this, sweep you across an ocean love story. For the folks who are interested in hearing more about your journey, what were sort of the biggest surprises or even challenges that came with moving your life from Philadelphia to Sweden? And what made you realize that Malmö would be your new permanent home?
Well, the thing is, when you move across, take this like sort of transatlantic journey that I did. I mean, before I went to Sweden, I'd never been across the ocean before. I mean, I'd gone to Canada before. I'd done like cross-country trips in the States and everything. But actually going across the ocean was like, it was something I dreamed of, but I never had the money to do it because I was a poor college student. And then I met Tord, and then we met and we sort of had this like summer romance, and then it became more. And then he said, why don't you come over and spend Christmas with me? So the first time I went to Sweden, it was as a tourist just for a month to spend the whole month of December there. Very romantic, Christmas lights everywhere, cute little Christmas markets and everything. And you're just going around and you're drinking glögg, which is like mulled wine. So it's like and it was, you're just going around drinking that in Christmas markets, and it's snowy, and you just think, oh, this is the most wonderful place in the world. And you don't think about the cultural differences because you don't notice them when you're there as a tourist. And then I moved here, and when I moved here, it was July of 2025. And I think at that point, that was when I started to understand, okay, yeah, like Sweden is very, very different from America. Even if Swedes are very I wouldn't say they're pro-USA all the time, but I mean, it's like most of the things, like anything that's trendy in America, they're fast adapters to it. But then there are certain things, like the way the society works here is very different from in the States, because, in the States, it's all about the individualism, and you sort of put yourself first and society second. When I moved here, and even to a certain extent now, it's still the same way, that you put society first and yourself second. So it's like, yes, of course, you should pay high taxes because those taxes pay for the infrastructure and the education system and the healthcare. And it's good for everybody because at some point you'll get to use all of those things and it's fine. But I had to get used to that way of thinking because I was still used to in the States, like, why should I pay taxes? Why should I have to pay high taxes for that person to be able to have free, or subsidized childcare.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't occur to me as a 25-year-old that this is actually something that's good for the society as a whole.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it took a few years, and when I understood it, then it was just like, oh, then my whole way of thinking changed. And then I had no problem with paying the higher taxes because I saw that I was actually getting something from it. And in actuality, the amount of taxes that we pay here in Sweden is actually slightly less than what most Americans pay. And we get more for it than what you get in the States. So I'm pretty okay with that. And then it was also the whole thing of learning a new language, because even if most Swedes speak English and they're very good at English, you still need to learn the language in order to feel like you can come into society properly. And especially, because of the fact that here in Sweden, they're very reserved. Swedes are renowned for being quite quiet and shy. So if you're going to make friends here, you have to be the one to make the initiative. And if you don't speak Swedish and then you get invited to dinner parties, or you get invited out to what they call fika, which is like the Swedish coffee break.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations usually go, like, they'll start in English, but they always end up drifting into Swedish. And if you don't know the language, then you're just sitting there waiting for people to translate for you.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might remember, like, oh, sorry, and switch back to English, but you've missed a lot of stuff, and they're just giving you sort of the bare bones of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was kind of hard getting used to, the fact that, really learning the language was such an important part of being able to come into society, but also that Swedes don't mind silence, whereas in the US, we feel like silence is a bad thing. We always feel like we have to fill those pockets of silence. And then now I realize, like, how much calmer I feel because I don't feel this pressure all the time to do the small talk, to fill all those little pockets of silence. It's okay to be quiet. It's okay to be sort of lost in your head for a while. And the Swedes don't mind. That's because that's what they like, and they're out. They're taking their walks. They're enjoying nature in a way that we don't always do in the States. And I think especially for Black and brown people in the States, where sometimes we feel like we don't have the same access to nature, whereas here you understand that nature is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So and you don't have to feel like you're at risk if you decide to take a walk in the woods on your own.
Right.
There's nobody who's going to be screaming at you to get off their property because the woods are public property. Nobody owns them. It's the government that owns them. And that means that we have this, there's this thing they call in Swedish, which is allemansrätten, which means it's a common right, and for nature, and even if it's something that's considered private property, you're still allowed to use it. You just have to, if it's private property, you just have to ask the permission of the person who owns the property. And most of the time they say yes. And the only thing they ask of you is that you don't litter on their property, or you don't destroy their property. And so if all you're going to do is walk across their property to get to a public path, you don't even have to ask, you can just do it. That's not something you can do very easily in the States, especially if you're in Black or brown skin.
You have covered so many topics, and I'm about to go off script. The first sort of element, I mean, you have described what my experience has been living in Switzerland for 13 years. And for me, I had a little bit of a cheat because my mother's Swiss. So I did have some kind of access to Swiss culture, and I did have some expectations. So certain things were not so shocking. And yet, everything that you mentioned were things that I struggled with until I got okay with it. From
Mm-hmm.
taxes, language. I did have some language abilities, but
Mm-hmm.
not enough, to feel like I could,
Mm-hmm.
be courageous and strike up a conversation with
Mm-hmm.
a reserved culture,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't want to sort of like blurt out something inappropriate in a language that I, am not very confident in.
Yeah.
So just so many things, and then from the silence as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the space of my life is so different here.
Yeah.
And now that goes into the being able to move through spaces, including the woods, without feeling like you're being a threat to somebody else,
Yeah.
or even being, like that you could be at risk,
Mm-hmm.
or taking a walk and not knowing that you might be stepping on somebody else's property.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just so many powerful themes,
Yeah.
and uh, I'm sorry, I had to just like
No, it's okay.
pause. Tell
But
me, how long did it take you to learn Swedish?
um I would say about 2 years. It started off like before I came to Sweden, my husband sent me like all these like Swedish comic books and everything because he figured they're simple. This will help you with at least getting used to some of the vocabulary so that even if you can't pronounce the words, you can read them and you'll understand them. And then when I went to a bookstore in Richmond that was actually owned by a Norwegian American woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, like, yeah, I have a Swedish boyfriend. I need to find a Swedish English dictionary. And she recommended one to me. And I told her what I was going to do. And she said, oh, well, you should always keep a little notebook with you. And then that way, when you come across a phrase that you don't recognize, because I think one of the things people don't think about is that Swedish and English actually have the same base, which is German and Latin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the proportions of German and Latin are a bit different. So when you're reading Swedish, as an English speaker, you recognize a lot of words. Some of them will end up being false friends, where it means something completely different than what you thought. But at least you know that from the beginning, the etymology was the same.
Yeah.
And so that helped a lot. And also there was this free newspaper when I moved to Sweden that was called Metro. So I used to pick up a copy of that every day. It was written in such a simple and clear way that even if you didn't understand that much Swedish, you could get the gist of what the news stories were about. So I would read through that every day and I would just have my pen and underline things. And when I got someplace where I could sit and actually take notes, I would put it in my little notebook. And here in Sweden, when you first move here, you are offered free Swedish classes. It's they call it Svenska för invandrare, which means like Swedish for immigrants. And it's free, and it's all about trying to get you into the system as quickly as possible so that you will understand the language, you will understand society, because when you're in these Swedish classes, they kind of give you tips about like the unwritten rules of Swedish as well. And so I was doing that. I was reading Metro, and then I started watching Swedish soap operas because they were kind of a new thing at that time. And there was one that was called Skilvalde, which was kind of like the bold and the beautiful of Sweden. And it was like all the sort of crazy storylines that you could think of, like, secret twins on, the
cousins.
Yeah, it was like, didn't know we were cousins. Oops, we've been dating kind of storylines. And the couple who's been like married and divorced a gajillion times. And so I watched that and I started to get the hang of more modern, informal Swedish. And I would ask my husband and I would ask my father-in-law and anybody else I could think of, like, oh, what does this mean? When they say this, what does that mean? And that really helped me a lot. So yeah, it was like after a while, I realized I knew enough Swedish that I could understand Swedish, but I hadn't really started to dare to speak Swedish. And then one day I was put in a situation where I had to speak Swedish. I was at Vårdcentralen, which is like they're the health clinics, that we have here that are pretty much like subsidized by the government. And I went to see a doctor, and the doctor didn't speak that much Swedish, or excuse me,
Right.
he didn't speak that much English, and I had to speak Swedish. And so we somehow, even though I couldn't remember all of the words for the symptoms I was having,
Yeah.
somehow I made myself understood to him. And then I realized, like, I did it. I can do this. And I just started to dare more to speak Swedish. I don't have the perfect Swedish accent. When I speak Swedish, I still sound like I'm from Philly. Everybody here thinks it's cool, so that's fine. But yeah, it took about 2 years, and so now, I mean, sometimes I read books in English, sometimes I read books in Swedish. I watch Swedish and American or UK TV shows and movies. I don't. If I'm watching a Swedish show, I don't need to have the English subtitles on. I can just watch it and enjoy it. But it took about 2 years.
I am so impressed. I'm really impressed because, like I said, I had a little bit of a linguistic base, and I would say it took me more than 2 years to just start to be courageous with, letting people know that I had some, and I understand a lot.
But in Switzerland, though, it's so you have German, you have French, you have Italian, and then I guess there's like more of a Swiss dialect. So I can imagine that's probably more of a linguistic challenge than here. I mean, you have the different dialects of Swedish, but for the most part, you can still understand, except for Skånska, which they speak here in Malmö, which sometimes feels like a completely different language. But yeah.
Yeah, Swiss German is lots of dialects. I mean, it's almost a misnomer to call it Swiss German because it's like Zurich German, Bern German. Depending on what town, like you can recognize the village somebody is from based on their accent. And so, yes, it can be a little bit of a adventure to try to understand it if you're learning German, which is what they teach in the schools. So in many ways, the Swiss, they grow up bilingual, German and then their local dialect.
Yeah.
But they're more comfortable speaking their actual dialect than High German. So
no, I can understand. I think here in Sweden, I mean, you have what they call rikssvenska, which is kind of like just the sort of national or the accepted Swedish, which is, there's certain areas of Sweden where you could say they definitely speak that type of Swedish. And then in Stockholm, there's something that Stockholm Swedish it's just got lots of slang words in it. And there's a certain accent that they have, especially if you come from the southern part of Stockholm, they have a very specific accent. Then you have West Coast Swedish, which sounds a bit different. It's a bit slower. The intonations are a little bit different, but the slang and everything, it's not that different. But then you come to southern Sweden, where I am. The region I'm in is called Skåne, and Skåne used to be part of Denmark. So Skånska sounds almost more like Danish than Swedish. And so depending on where you're from in Skåne, the dialect can sometimes be very difficult to understand. Luckily, here in Malmö, it's pretty easy to understand. So if you meet somebody who was born and raised here in Malmö and they speak Skånska with you, it's easy to understand. But then if it's somebody who comes from, I don't know, Trelleborg or or Ystad, or their accent is very different, and they have slightly different slang that they use. And then sometimes you're like, I don't know what they said. And it takes a couple of times. Like you might have a few minutes where you just have to like listen, and then it finally gets through. But oh gosh, the first time that I heard Skånska, I thought it was that somebody was playing a prank on me.
Right.
And I was working in a bookstore in Stockholm, and the person was like asking me to order a book for them, and I couldn't understand a single thing that they were saying.
Mm.
And I said to him, like, do you think we could speak Swedish? And he's like, he started yelling at me in skånska, but I am speaking Swedish. And I was like, I couldn't understand him, so I had to get one of my colleagues to take the call.
I'm really moved by your courage. That because it's a lot.
Mhm.
I need to get off this thing because we're totally geeking out in the fine arts direction, talking about the roots of language and all of that. So I'm gonna try to get us back on script. But before I start to ask you about your journey to fiction, I want to ask you one last question about
Yes.
now that you've been in Sweden for some 20 years or so. What is the one thing that you miss from Philly? One.
Oh my gosh, Philly cheesesteaks.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, like I'm from Philly, so we don't call them Philly cheesesteaks like everybody else does. And I know exactly where I would get one from. We just call them cheesesteaks. And it's like, and I know exactly where I would go to get one, and it wouldn't be Pat's or Gino's, which everybody else tells you to go to, because those are just tourist traps. I would go to D'Alessandro's, or I would go to one of the local places in University City, West Philly, the area that I grew up in, and get a cheesesteak with fried onions, salt, pepper, ketchup, and provolone cheese on it. And I miss having that. And there's nowhere here in Sweden to get one, so I'd have to make it myself. Yeah. But in order to make it myself, I'd have to get the right type of bread. And the right type of bread is an Amoroso roll. So I'd have to learn how to make the rolls the way they do at the Amoroso bakery in order to get the right thing. So the only thing I can do is just get like a sourdough baguette or something and just pretend it's the right thing. But I know how to make one, so it's fine. It's just like you eat it and you're like, this is good, but the bread's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I miss. And scrapple. I love scrapple. Scrapple is pretty much everything that's left over from the pig after you have slaughtered the pig. And then they make a loaf out of it, and they put some herbs and spices in it. And then you slice it, you put it, you put a little flour, salt and pepper, and then you fry it and you eat it for breakfast. And it's so good. It sounds gross, but it's delicious. And when we were kids, my mom would make this with fried apples. So we'd have fried apples, biscuits, scrambled eggs, and scrapple. And I loved it. And so whenever I go back to Philly, I usually go to Reading Terminal and go to the Amish. They have like an Amish lunch stand there, and they always have scrapple. So I'll get a scrapple sandwich there, or get a scrapple plate with scrambled eggs and the fried apples and everything. Is so good. So that I miss, because I will never get here.
That sounds good, actually. I'd like the apple and pork combination. Anyway.
Oh, it's so good. It's really good. A lot of people say they don't like scrapple, but most of the people who say that have never actually tried it. If you try it, you like it.
Right. Yeah.
They just see it as they think it's going to be mushy or look weird or smell weird, and it doesn't. It just it's bliss for me. So I miss it.
My mouth is watering, actually. I was kind of hoping that you were going to say Philly cheesesteaks, because I haven't had a Philly cheesesteak since leaving the US. So yeah.
There's actually a place in London where you can get them. I haven't tried them, but a friend of mine who's from Philly, who lives in London, has tried one of their cheesesteaks, and he says that they taste just like the ones in Philly.
Okay.
And the name of the place is Passyunk Avenue. And Passyunk Avenue is a part of South Philly. It's where back at least in the 80s and 90s, you could find tons of different cheesesteak places. And so, yeah, Passyunk Avenue.
Notes. Like the Alessandros, if I go to the US and I go to Philadelphia, the Alessandros, and next time I go to London, I might have to just check out Passyunk Avenue, because
when we're done, I'll send you how they spell it and everything so you can find it, because I'm telling you, at least from what my friend Adam told me, the cheesesteaks there are wonderful, and you get to like indulge in just watching Philly sports while you're there. So if it's football season, you get to watch the Eagles games and everything. If it's baseball season, of course, it's going to be the Phillies. If it's basketball season, of course, it's the Sixers. And soccer season, of course, you're going to see Philadelphia Union. And of course, now it's hockey season, so you're going to see the Flyers. Always a good thing.
Okay. Well, the sports is not really what turns me on. It's the food, but
Yeah,
that's
go
okay.
for the food.
You can watch all the teams. So
Yes, yes. And I have to ask him if they serve any of like the craft beers from Philly, because that would be really great if they did.
yeah, that'd be cool.
Mm.
All right, let us move into your journey to fiction.
Yes.
Let's talk about your path to becoming an author. Sounds like you kind of knew that this was the direction you wanted to take, having pursued an MFA. So
Yeah.
what got you into writing romantic women's fiction, since you already knew you were going to be an author?
I mean, I think I knew even before I started working on my MFA that I was going to end up there. Because when I was a kid, I used to write these short stories and send them to my grandparents in Virginia. Usually they were about like trying to convince them to buy me a horse, even though I lived in the middle of the city. And I kept telling them I was going to convince my parents to turn our garage into a stable. Never happened, but I think my grandparents enjoyed these stories that I would write about the horse that I would have and the adventures I would have in Philly with this horse. But when I was in high school, I went to this high school that specialized in engineering, science, and architecture. And I realized while I was there that I was not going to do any of those things.
Mhm.
Because I didn't really, for me, math and science were just, it was like a completely different language. Uh,
Mhm.
but it was one of the best high schools in the city. So I knew that, my parents wanted me to go there so they'd get a good education and I could get into the colleges I wanted to go to. So I just stayed on track with that. But I also knew I'm not going to study science. Always wanted to study writing, kept telling my parents that was what I wanted to do. And they wanted me to do something practical because they felt like, if you're going to be a writer, you're not going to make that much money. You need to have something that you can do that's going to help you pay the bills and blah, blah, blah. And I felt like, yeah. But I always was interested in relationships and like, how do people meet each other?
Mhm.
What is it that brings people together? And so any of the short stories that I used to write in my my 5 subject notebooks that were supposed to be for class usually were filled instead with these short stories or books, ideas for books that I wanted to write. And then when I started working on my master's degree, I mean, at that point, um, I was really into literary fiction. At that point, it was like, I mean, some of my favorite authors then were, and they still are, Toni Morrison, Milan Kundera, uh, and then Ernest Hemingway short stories. I love them. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zora Neale Hurston. So it was that sort of fiction that I was reading
Yeah.
and thinking, this is what I'm going to write. And then I would write these stories for my MFA workshops, and I just felt like, yeah, okay, I'm writing literary fiction, but it's not really connecting
Mm.
for me. And then my guilty pleasure back then was I would go to Borders bookstore at the mall in Richmond, and I would always end up picking up either psychological thrillers or historical romances or what ended up being called chick lit at that point.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh, I just love reading these. Maybe this is what I should write. And I was lucky enough that my thesis advisor was Tom DeHaven, who wrote, if you remember the movie The Crow, when that first came out, he wrote the script for that. And he also wrote a lot of science fiction, and he wrote sort of like hard boiled detective novels and
Mhm.
graphic novels. So he was really going more from a sort of genre fiction angle than a lot of the other uh, professors were. And he said to me, you know what, stop thinking about what everybody tells you should be writing. Write what you know you enjoy reading, because
Mm.
that's what you're going to enjoy writing. So I took that to heart. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to start focusing on just writing about relationships and people looking for love. And when I did that, I realized that the story started to feel more authentic. And it was really, I felt like, okay, this is my sweet spot. This is where I want to be. And I haven't looked back since then.
I love that. And going off script again, want to know if, as you were kind of discovering that, is that when you met Mr. Swede?
Yeah. Halfway through this journey, that's when I met him. I
Wow.
think I'd been working on my master's degree for about a year when he and I met. And I think, you know how sometimes you have that thunderbolt and lightning moment when
Mm-hmm.
you just know this is the right person?
Yeah.
And I just knew, and I think he knew too. And it's just been the two of us since then. It was, yeah, I think back to, I was 23, I think,
Mm-hmm.
maybe just getting ready to turn 24 when he and I met. And he's just 6 months older than me. And I think we both had a similar sort of reaction, like understanding that we felt this connection and that we understood that, okay, it's just going to be the two of us. And it has been. And other people thought, oh no, this is just going to be like some kind of summer romance that you are having.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew it wasn't. And we just
Mm-hmm.
ignored them when they told us that it was just a summer thing. And a lot of people said to me, like, oh, but why do you want to date somebody from Europe? He's going to go back to Europe and he's not going to think about you anymore, or it's
Right.
going to be too different, even if you wanted to make a go of it, because he's white and you're black. And I said, well, I mean, you don't know until you try.
Right.
And so I decided to take that risk. And what I can say is that a lot of the people who told us that it was going to be a summer fling are now like divorced and married and divorced again, and
Mm-hmm.
we're still together. So
Yes.
obviously we did something right. We knew what we were doing.
I I love your story, and thank you for sharing that your
Mhm.
husband's white, because that was going to be my next question. I mean, because you can't assume
No,
that
you
there
can't,
are
because I
there
mean,
are
you have people here in Sweden who are either mixed race or black, or they're coming from other backgrounds. They could be. There's a lot of people have been adopted from Korea and from other parts of the world. So you can't really assume. But I think
yeah,
most people, still, the assumption is that you're going to meet somebody who's a Swede and they think like an ethnic Swede. And yes, I mean, I would say that like 80% of the population here are ethnically Swedish. So that's who you're going to meet here. And,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it was, even with all the times when we have had like these culture clashes. And sometimes he's just like, why do you think this way? And I'm like, because I'm American and I'm from Philadelphia. That might explain it. And it's especially when I'm being super feisty. It's like, that's the Philly side of me. That has nothing to do with being American. That's just being from Philly.
And it might even be like broader than being from Philly. It might be an East Coast thing, because
It could be.
my husband, he grew up in New York, so there's that feistiness.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I think that sometimes I think is like definitely very Philly is like we have this sort of underdog mentality,
Mm,
because we were, you had everybody thinking like everything that's cultural in Boston and New York.
mm,
And then everything that has to do with politics is in DC.
mhm.
And then, a lot of people just skip over Philly
Yeah.
when they're visiting the States, because they're just like, oh, what do they know from Philly? Okay, Rocky and Fresh Prince. Is it worth getting off the train
Mhm,
to go
mhm.
to Philly? No, because to them that's all they know. And they're like, oh, then I'd rather go to New York and I'm going to do my Sex in the City tour or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that especially now in Philly, like there's a lot of people who, lived in New York, can't afford it anymore, moving to Philly and discovering the charm of Philly. And also, I know that since British Airways has Philly as one of their hubs, there's like a lot of people from the UK who've been to Philly, discovered it, and love it, and talk about like how much they love going there, and how they like the sort of neighborhood charm that it has, and
That's true.
the so for us it's we have this sense of pride of like where we come from, and we're a town that still has a very strong neighborhood feel. So like each neighborhood has its own unique feel,
Yeah.
and I don't think you get that really so much in a lot of other towns in the States. I mean, I think Boston probably still has it, New York as well, but it's like, I think one of the things I worry about is the gentrification that's coming in and sort of erasing a lot of that neighborhood feel. So hopefully we can maintain it a bit longer.
I hope so for your sake. I don't know if I experienced that kind of neighborhood feel growing up in Washington, D.C. You know, I mean, yes, each neighborhood had its name and its vibe, and I guess like a cultural purpose, you know, but I couldn't say that each neighborhood seemed to have like a community vibe.
Yeah.
But DC is also a very transient city. I mean, it changes
Yeah.
every administration. So
Yeah, and I think the thing in Philly too, like I remember I read this in a journal about the dialects that we have in Philly, that we have so many different dialects. And if you're from Philadelphia, you can tell by the dialect that the person speaks which part of Philadelphia they're from, even if nobody else can tell, because there's a certain vernacular that they use that is completely different. And it all depends on if you're from a certain part of South Philadelphia, if you're from a certain part of West Philadelphia or North Philly. Each neighborhood has its own syntax, its own, the vernacular, the dialect, the accent even. And so for me, when I'm talking to people from Philly, I can, even now after all these years of not living there, I can tell which part of Philly they're from. And they usually can tell which part of Philly I'm from, even if I don't think I have the strongest Philly accent anymore. But when I'm there and I come back to Sweden, it comes through a lot stronger.
I could talk to you all day because I love geeking out about language, dialect, vernacular, accents, pronunciation, the song, and the movement of language. Anyway, but we won't do that because I want to talk to you about your book.
Yeah.
And because, okay, I'm having a traffic jam in my mind. So first, I wanted to go first and ask you about the craft of writing, because your book that you're writing on Substack, which we will get to after I ask you this question, is all like you read as I write kind of setup. So how do you do that? I mean, basically, you're writing live.
Yeah, and
it's a lot of pressure.
It is. I mean, the thing was that the reason I decided to do it this way was because back in 2019, my brother passed away, and I went through this. I kind of lost my writing mojo, and it took me a long time to get back into it. Then in 2022, we found out that first my niece had leukemia, and then my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. So I shelved every writing project I had at that time and just focused on, trying to be there for the family. So whenever anybody said, hey, and also one of my closest friends in Stockholm was a cancer specialist. So I felt like, okay, she's saying she can help with information. Anybody needs to have, if they're going into their doctor's appointment and they need somebody who can be on hand, I'll make sure that she can be with us and we can do a video call. And so that took up a lot of my time, and I just stopped writing for a very long time. Then My mom was cancer-free and I started writing again. I had a book I was working on, which was the idea that I had for A Piece of My Heart. And then we found out later that my mom's cancer was back.
Uh,
And then I just stopped writing again. And because I kept thinking that the writing would sort of be like this sanctuary for me while I was going through this. But instead, the grief was just, I started going through anticipatory grief, and I couldn't get any writing done, and I couldn't think about writing. And every time I thought about writing, it felt superficial and not important at all. So I just focused on going, like, after my mom passed away, it was just focusing on grief counseling and trying to get back on track. And one of the things my grief counselor said to me was that if writing is what makes you happy, you need to find a way back to it. And maybe instead of saying to yourself, oh, I have to finish my first draft by this date so I can publish the book by that date, why don't you just serialize it? Because you've done a serial novella before, so why not just do it again? And I thought, she's onto something. And I was just trying to figure out how to do it. First, I was going to do it through my author website. And then later I found out about Substack, and I saw how I could use Substack to share my story. And I thought, I'm just going to do it here because it felt like a softer community than some of the other platforms I'd seen. I mean, some people had said to me, like, why don't you do it on Wattpad? Or why don't you do it here or there? But I just felt like, no, I want to have like a community around me that feels positive. And I wasn't sure I was going to get that sort of energy from some of the other platforms. So I just focused on, okay, I'm going to post my aim was to post a chapter a week. So, and most of the time I've been able to do that. Now in December and January, it hasn't been that way just because it's been the holidays and then coming back to my day job. My day job is writing copy for everybody's favorite Swedish home furnishings brand. And that takes up a lot of time. So, but I have a new chapter I'm working on that I'm almost done with. So that will go online this weekend. But yeah, that's what I decided to do. Just write, share the chapters, and then my plan was always publish the new chapters on Sunday. And so I was able to do that, without any problems for several months, and then got busy with some new projects at work, and Christmas came. But I'm getting back on track again, and I'm hoping to have the last few chapters of this book online before the end of February.
All right. Well, no pressure. Let's talk about part of the book that you have written, which would be the blurb, and then maybe you could also just share with us a few words from the opening, from an opening chapter, if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll read for you the blurb. This is what I put up on Substack when I decided I was going to first start publishing this. So Alex Sigurdsson has a talent for making people feel alive again. It's what he does for a living. But since he moved back to his hometown of Hunters Grove to care for his ailing father, Alex's own life has been bereft of love. Sasha Remington lost her husband Aidan in a horrific train derailment. Alone now with her young daughter Cammie, Sasha is finding it difficult to connect with anyone, and she's haunted by her dead husband's ghosts and memories. When a mutual friend convinces Alex to take Sasha on as one of his clients, the last thing he expects is the fierce rush of tenderness and desire she elicits in him. The more he tries to keep things professional, the harder it is to stay away. So what I'm going to do, I will read the first few paragraphs of the opening chapter from Alex's point of view.
Great.
Alex, have you got a minute? I'd just finished watering my plants and rolling up the futons in my studio space come treatment room when I heard Abigail call out to me. Abigail and I have been working in the same building for about 6 months now. Like me, Abigail was a therapist, but her specialty was cognitive behavioral therapy and Reiki healing, while mine was a little more alternative. Actually, she owned the building. I was pretty sure someone mentioned that she'd inherited it from her elderly grandparents who'd moved to Florida to escape the snow and cold that was Vermont weather. Most times Abigail nodded at me. I don't think she really approved of what I did for a living. Give me a sec, I shouted as I shoved my feet into my battered Doc Martens and reached for my quilted flannel work shirt. The windows to my studio space were already speckled with frost. They'd said on the radio this morning that we should get ready for a cold front. It wasn't even November yet. Well, okay, we were one day away from it since it was Halloween. Even the light looked different now. That warm, intense blue that marked summer skies was now pale, almost watery. At least the sun was still up, though it would be setting in another hour or two. I took another look around the studio to make sure everything was in its place. People came to me for a sense of peace, and I always wanted to make sure I could deliver on it. Clutter didn't help. Clutter made them fidgety, so I made a habit of constantly clearing up, airing out the futon mattresses, and then rolling them up and piling them on a shelf, spritzing or watering the plants and wiping them clean of dust, setting the air filter and humidifier on low for the night. When tomorrow's patient walked in, everything would be ready for him or her. They'd know they'd be taken care of. I turned off the lights and closed up the studio for the day, then clomped down the stairs to the area Abigail called hers. In the old days, when her grandparents still lived there, it was the living room, library, dining room, kitchen, and mudroom. A small guest bathroom was hidden under the stairs, but I knew there was a full-size bathroom somewhere there too. The dove gray walls of the front room, which was her waiting area, exuded serenity. The couch and 3 armchairs she'd strategically placed by the window, but not too far from the fireplace, which still worked. In fact, she still had a fire going, crackling and casting off enough heat to make the room feel cozy. Abigail was straightening up too. Her day had also come to an end, though I knew she'd probably stay for another hour to write up her reports and get her paperwork in order. Hey, what's up? I adjusted my thick wool scarf around my neck as I stood by the pocket doors. I need a favor, and I'm hoping you won't see it as an imposition in any way. This was typical of Abigail. Her family was one of the original founding families in Hunter's Grove, and she was always being gracious and polite. She used to say she didn't take her position in town too lightly. I figured she took it a little too seriously, but she was proud of the town, and she was always kind to people. Don't make it sound so ominous, I joked. You need some help moving furniture or something? No, nothing like that. She gestured for me to come in. Would you like some tea? I was about to make some for myself. No thanks, I've got to stop by the diner for my dad. It was his thing. He wanted chili and cornbread for Halloween, followed by pumpkin pie for dessert. I could have easily made it or tried to make it, but he insisted it come from the diner. He had also called and reminded me to pick up Halloween candy, which I already had in my backpack. I set my backpack by the door and came into the waiting area. She gestured at the couch, but I took one of the armchairs. I wanted to feel the sun on my neck, even if it wouldn't be warm now. Abigail flashed a nervous-looking smile at me. That couldn't be good. Whatever she wanted to ask me was making her tight and chirpy. I suppose I should just plunge in and ask. The worst you can say is no. It can't be that bad. It's not. Not really. I don't think it is. Abigail flapped her hands. My goodness. I am making it sound rather dramatic, aren't I? I nodded and shrugged. Yeah, a little. Well, I have this friend who only recently moved to Hunter's Grove. Abigail cleared her throat. She glanced at her empty teacup, set on a glass coaster on the Queen Anne-style coffee table. I could make the tea for you if you want, but I really need to go soon. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, of course, your father. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her pants leg. Well, my friend, what's her name? Sasha Remington. Do you know her? I shook my head no. I knew some Remingtons, but none named Sasha. Her husband, you must have known him. Aidan Remington. He went to Manchester Day School with us. I remember him. Aidan Remington and I hadn't been the best of friends, but that was mostly because we played on the school's football team. He was the star. I'd mostly been a bench warmer, and he'd like to rub it in my face. But that was back in high school. At NYU, things changed. Neither of us had known how to handle the city, and for a while, we'd almost been friends, helping each other navigate the concrete jungle. But then we found new friends, and our paths separated. We nodded at each other and were polite when we bumped into each other, but we never had that closeness again. I heard he died in that commuter train wreck outside of New York. Yes, it was horrible, and Sasha's holding up as best she can, but I think she needs more help than I can give her. So that's
All
my.
I want to know is what is his alternative work?
He is what you would call a cuddle therapist.
Oh,
So for people who are having problems with, sometimes you have people who they don't like to be touched,
mm-hmm.
or they've gone through some kind of trauma where they feel that they can't connect with people. And sometimes it's just that somebody just needs to feel like they have somebody who cares about them, who will just hold their hand. A cuddle therapist will be that person who is trained in learning how to have a sort of physical connection with people without it becoming too intimate.
Right.
And so they help those people reconnect. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they misinterpret it and think that a cuddle therapist is a type of sex therapist, but that's not what they do. It's all about talking to the person, getting them to get used to having that sort of physical contact with people in a platonic way
Yeah.
to get them to be able to reconnect.
Yeah.
And it's I did a lot of research on it. I was like quite fascinated by it because I'd heard about it before, and I'd made the assumption as well that they were a type of sex worker, and they're not. They have to go through a lot of training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in some places, they need to be sort of certified in order to become a, and they have to think a lot about making sure that they never cross the boundaries. And I remember watching a documentary about it where they asked one of the therapists, had there ever been a time when they wanted to cross the boundaries? And they said, yes, but they also knew what would be the consequences. And I thought, what would happen to this person who realizes that they're falling in love with
Right.
their client and is still trying to do right by that client? And that is how the idea for A Piece of My Heart came about.
That is fascinating. And I think I can connect this question to one of my scripted questions. Because some of what you write is about interracial or
Mhm.
multicultural partnerings and relationships. So, how does that factor into this story? Is Alex possibly black or in a mainly white setting, or what's the dynamic or the tension there?
Sasha is the one who is black in our story.
Okay.
Alex is is Scandinavian American. His father comes from a family from southern Sweden who emigrated to the States during the 50s. But Alex has grown up in a household that is still very Scandinavian. But they also are seen as being like, part of the old guard of uh, of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, like people know Alex's brother, who is a doctor who lives in California now. he was sort of seen as the golden child of the Sigurdsson family. And so now here you have Alex, who's there taking care of the father, who has is exhibiting signs of dementia.
Mm.
And he left his cuddle therapy practice in New York behind to move back to Vermont to take care of his dad, even though his dad doesn't think he needs anybody to take care of him. Sasha is the outsider here. She is a Black woman who's originally from Baltimore, who met her husband, Aiden. Aiden was Black and adopted by a white family in Vermont. And he's gone, and she's having to deal with grieving her husband, being a single mom, but also dealing with the dynamics of being a widow in a family that takes up a lot of space. And so she's having some issues with her mother-in-law, who is used to sort of being the grande dame of the town. Here she is as a Black woman challenging this woman, and also dealing with the fact that she knows that she needs this alternative therapy, and understanding that not everybody else understands what she's doing. And then that she has, because she's been so focused on making sure that her daughter still has a relationship with her husband's family, that she sometimes put her own family on a back burner.
Right.
Which I think is something like, no matter what sort of relationship you're in, I think a lot of people can recognize that, especially if they've lost a partner, that the one who's gone, you try to feel like you can keep that connection going with their family. And sometimes you end up neglecting your own family.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. Wow. So many layers. And it's so much more than, I guess I can't think of a better word, but a basic love story, or just a simple love story, a girl meets boy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I have a friend who's a writer as well, and we often brainstorm together. And she always says to me, you write romantic fiction, but you don't write romantic fiction in an easy way. And she always teases me about this, and she's like, you say you don't write literary fiction, but in a way you are, because you're adding all these extra layers. And that's why not everybody connects with everything that you write, because the people who like literary fiction but who also like romantic fiction connect with it. And then the people who just want something where they don't have to think about the realities of life, who just want something that's like, I want a love story that's like more straightforward, they don't always like what I write. And that's okay, because I know I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But I have to write the stories. I write the stories that I like reading. And
Absolutely.
I like complicated stories. I don't like it when it's too simple. So it's like I like having, my books end up having a lot of I guess you could say, like, the slices of life that we're dealing with now. So one of my other releases from a few years ago, it came out just after the 2016 election, and there was a lot in that book about that election, and some people didn't like it and said that if they wanted politics in their romances, then they would read a different type of book. And I just felt like, well, how can I write a story that's supposed to reflect the world we live in and not touch on this? And I tried not to make it a central issue, but it came up a couple of times in the book, and that's okay by me.
These are the things that drive the tensions between people, right? I mean, we exist in a space that, brings out the worst in us.
No, exactly. And I mean, it's in the book I was talking about, Near Enough to Hold, there's a scene where Nick, the main character, is out walking. He's one of the main characters anyway, because that one's the dual points of view, and he's out walking his dog, and they see a sign for the candidate that a lot of people didn't like. And he doesn't mind that his dog pees on that sign. And he's pretty happy that his dog chose just that sign. And I had somebody who wrote a bad review for the book just because they objected to the fact that a dog urinated, or wrote the pee mail, as my husband and I call it, whenever dogs are sort of like doing their thing. Yeah, and I felt like, well, if I had a dog, then I wouldn't mind if the dog did that. It'd be okay by me. And but some people didn't like it. So that's okay. I
So
can't please everybody.
no, you can't. And but actually on that topic, what you're doing is I guess I called it live writing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The serialized writing, that is where you're actively engaging with your reader.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent do you tap into the expectations and the hopes of your readers? And to what extent do you just sort of say, like, I do not pay attention to any of the chatter until I'm through?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes will get like private messages from readers who tell me what they like and don't like. But right now, because I'm just trying to write the book, I just write what I want to write. And I will, like, if they tell me, oh, I really like that scene, and oh my God, this character, she's like this, I will joke with them about it. And sometimes if they say something that I think, oh yeah, that's something to keep in mind for later when I decide to go back and maybe revise or something. But right now, I'm just focused on this is the story I want to tell. And no matter, even when I'm writing my other books, it's like I might at the back of my mind have the comments that I've received or reviews that people have written on Goodreads or something. But most of the time, I just feel like if that person couldn't connect with this character or that book, I am not going to sit there and write a completely different type of book just to satisfy them.
Right.
It's like, this is the little corner that I like writing in. That's what I'm going to write because these are the stories that I would like to read. And I just have to tell myself to disconnect. So one of the things I've stopped doing is, for example, I don't go on Goodreads anymore and read reviews. I don't really care. I don't go on to Amazon or any of the online retailers and read reviews anymore because I think sometimes the reviews that you see there, they're commenting on things that don't even really have anything to do with what you've written.
Right.
I had someone who gave me a bad review because they thought I wrote a story where the person was cheating, and it's just that they didn't understand what a flashback scene
Right.
was. And I'd already set it up very clearly so that it was a flashback scene. So I feel like, okay, you're used to reading a different type of book.
Yeah.
My books aren't for you.
You have to be very self-aware to do that. I definitely would not have the courage to write in the moment. I feel like I have to be very considerate of the words that I put on a page, and then I'd have to kind of like let it sit.
Yeah.
Even when I'm revising for myself, that I'm also kind of having this dialogue, and only after a certain amount of time, it's like, yep, nope, this is the decision I've made to publish.
Yeah.
But I probably would second guess myself if I had the chatter of readers while I'm drafting. Yeah.
I think the good thing is it's like most of the people who send me comments on Substack, like they send them as like a direct message rather than putting them in the chat. And I just decide then, like sometimes they'll just put a comment at the end of the chapter I've posted, and usually the ones I get there, it's like they're fun comments, so I read them and I'm just like, okay, great, and then I go back to writing. The ones who send me direct messages, I usually tell myself, don't read them right now.
Yeah.
Focus on finishing the chapter or the next chapter that you're working on, and then go back and read them and see what they have to say. And but I would say the majority of them have been quite positive, and they just ask me, sometimes they'll ask me questions about like, oh, why did you decide to make this character that way. And if I feel like I want to answer that question, I do, or I'll just say to them, like, I will, when I finish writing the book, I can tell you more about that. But it's one of the things that I just had to realize, because this is the second time I've done a serial novel or a novella. I did one many years ago that was based on, it was a companion novella to another book that I'd written, and I released a couple of chapters a month through Kindle Unlimited just to see how it would go. And it was fun to do it, but it was also, when I did that one, there were a lot of people who they mostly just wrote to me to tell me, oh, I don't like this character, or I don't like that character. I didn't really get much feedback on whether or not they were enjoying the story as a whole. Just they would tell me what they liked and didn't like about a character. Or one person was like, "You're not giving us enough sex scenes," and I'm one of these people, like, I don't put a sex scene in a book unless I think it makes sense.
Right.
If is it going to move the story forward? Great. Is it just because it's titillating? I don't care about them. I mean, it's like, I like I like to have the erotic tension and everything like everybody else, but I don't feel like I need to put a scene in a book just because somebody said a romantic story has to have 3 sex scenes in it. Right. If it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to put it in there.
Right. I think this is a wonderful close. I love how anchored you are in your craft. So 2 questions before we wrap up. The first question is, do you have any tips on craft, or besides just getting the button seat, but like so that you can get words on a page and do the project that we want to do?
I would say the main thing is to know your characters. You need to know them inside out. And I think my usual thing is, I start with kind of interviewing my characters. It's going to sound bonkers, but I will imagine that they're sitting across the table from me. And I start writing. I might have a list of questions asking, like, oh, what are you afraid of? And whatever's the first thing that comes into my mind, I decide that's that character speaking to me. Because I think that's the thing, like when you're a writer, you are a little crazy. You do hear the voices of your characters all the time. And I just try to imagine, like, oh, okay, this person, yes, Alex, he's afraid of this. What does Alex want? Oh, he wants that. And I just start writing it down. And sometimes I'll start asking myself, well, what's his first memory? Does he remember the first time he was in love? And just writing those things down so that I can really understand them inside out. And I think before you even start writing the outline for your story, and I know, like, I'm one of these people who's sort of a combination of a plotter and a pantser, because sometimes I don't write a plot outline at all. I just go with, like, I got inspired, I got this idea, let's just roll with it. And then other times I'm very meticulous about, like, I'm making an outline. These are the beats I want to hit and everything. But I think the main thing is, before, no matter if you are a plotter or a pantser, you need to know your characters, and you need to know what they want, and you need to know what is it, where are they at the moment the story is going to start, and where do they want to be at the end, or where do you want them to be? Because where you want them to be might not be where they want to be, but it might be where they need to be.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of advice I would give. And then also, especially since I'm a bit of a visual person, like, I like making mood boards for my books. So I use Pinterest for that. Or sometimes I'll just go onto Canva and make a grid and find images to put in it, and then make that as like the wallpaper for my computer. So then when I open up my computer, that's the first thing I see, and it kind of pulls me in. So I think,
love it.
yeah. So I think do that. Like think about what house do you imagine them living in, and find images of those things. Like one of the other projects I'm working on is set in Copenhagen in Italy, and I've been like finding pictures of the type of house that I think the one character lives in Copenhagen, and the villa in Italy that the other character is living in, and where in Italy is it, and what does that place look like in spring, and what does it look like in summer, and so on, just so I can. And also that one has two timelines. So one timeline is in 1960s Italy and Denmark, and the other one is in contemporary Italy and Denmark. So trying to have like pictures from both periods of what's important that was happening at that time, having those things there.
Yeah.
So I can really get inspired by it. So I think that's the thing, just immerse yourself. You got to do world building, and you have to do character building.
Yeah. And you're really engaging with those worlds and characters, right?
Yeah.
Like it's actually, you're talking about a very sort of active process. It's not just sitting back and thinking, you're asking questions. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So where can readers find you?
They can find me, of course, on Substack. I also, all of my books are on the online retailers, so like Amazon, Kobo, iBooks, and so on. So they can find me there, or they can find me on my author site, which is kim-golden.com. And yeah, otherwise they can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot. Or actually, I shouldn't call it Twitter anymore. It's called X now. And since I'm a big Prince Harry and Meghan Markle fan, I'm usually chatting about stuff there regarding her shows and so on. But yeah, I mean, and otherwise, places to find me, if you're ever in Matera, Italy, I go there a lot.
Okay.
I love it there. And otherwise, I'm in Copenhagen a lot because it's just across the bridge from Malmö. So those are the places that people can find me. And also on Instagram, because I love Instagram. I know probably it's like a bit old to say you love Instagram, but I do love Instagram because it gives me a chance. Like when I'm going around and I'm getting inspired and I take pictures, I share a lot of things, especially since I travel a lot to Italy, and a lot of now the other book I'm working on is set there. If I find images while I'm there, or I take a picture, I share it so that other people can sort of get into that same thinking and feel inspired as well. And who knows, maybe they'll get inspired to go to Italy.
Well, if you do come down south and head to Italy, call me, because I love going to Italy, and it's
awesome.
Just a quick train ride away. So
absolutely, because I love meeting other writers, and especially since we're on the same side of the world, we ought to meet.
Yes, we should. There are other romance authors in Sweden that, and I had one on the show a few months back. So, yeah.
Was it Cherish?
Yes, it was Miss Sweden.
Yes, I have. The funny thing is, we haven't had a chance to meet face to face, but we chat all the time online. And then she and Lola Akimade, who wrote Bitter Honey, we have our own little three-way chat going. We're always like sort of like cheering on each other. So it's lots of fun.
The Swedish connection.
Yes, our Swedish connection.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kim Golden, for your very golden contribution to our conversation. And to our listeners, you've heard all the places where you can find Kim Golden's work. Kim Golden, her Substack, and she's actually, if you just type in the name Kim Golden, you'll find her. And her website, kim-golden.com.
Yeah.
And you can find out more about me and Golden Creatives Talk podcast. You can find me on YouTube and also on brownbeyondborders.substack.com. So that's where I live, or CT Luna. So thank you so much, Kim, for joining us. Do you have any final words before we cut down this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I can tease people about a bit is that I have a book that is going to be coming out on February 28th. It's a re-release of a novella that I wrote that was for the Happily Ever After collective that was only available on Patreon a few years ago. And so now I've done a little bit of tweaking to it, got a new cover, a couple of new scenes in it, and it's called Marry Me, and it's set in Hunter's Grove, so it's going to be a part of this whole Hunter's Grove universe, and that's going to be coming out on February 28th.
So which should I start reading first?
Oh, it's like, it doesn't matter because they're standalones.
Okay, great. I'm about to get a piece of my heart going on right now, and sign me up for the February 28th release.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us at Golden Creatives Talk. Until next time.